It's not about policies, documentation, or compliance. It's fundamentally about relationship. How we show up, how we hold power, and how we begin our relationships with supervisees all shape whether supervision becomes a space of growth, safety, and accountability, and not a space of fear, silence, or harm. So having said that, I invite you to reflect to yourselves, just take a brief moment to think about this as we move through the presentation. What makes supervision feel safe, ethical, and meaningful? Oops. So relational foundations of ethical supervision. So we all know that ethics is often taught as rules, boundaries, confidentiality, dual relationships, reporting requirements, and so on. And all of these do matter, but ethics is actually lived out through relationship. If the relationship is unsafe, hierarchical, or shaming, will not bring their mistakes, questions, or uncertainties. And that is where ethical risk actually grows. I offer you here 3 relational elements from the ethical foundation of supervision: trust, respect, and cultural humility. Trust is built through consistency, reliability, follow through, and emotional safety. Respect means recognizing supervisees as whole people, not just clinicians in training, but humans shaped by culture, identity, and context. We often say in our fellowship at El Puente, and we emphasize this to our fellows, is that we are always community members first, right? And I know that I make that intention of, in whatever space I find myself, to remind people that aside from all those things you heard in my bio, I am always a community member first. And we all must also remind ourselves of that in our supervision process. And then thirdly, cultural humility is an ongoing learning commitment, is acknowledging power, difference, and similarities, and our own limits, and staying open to learning from those we supervise. We are lifelong learners. When these foundations are present, supervisees can speak honestly about mistakes, struggles, and uncertainties, which is exactly what ethical practice requires. Now, this is what I consider kind of the heart of this presentation, is looking at the healing-centered and relational leadership roles that we must take in supervision, moving from compliance to care. Healing-centered supervision shifts us from asking, how do I monitor and control risk, to asking, how do I create the conditions where ethical reflective practice can grow? Traditional supervision, and I want to clarify that the term traditional here is being used to refer to the Western framework of mental health. And I clarify this because traditional and tradition can mean different things for different communities. So I just want to make that clear here. So traditional supervision in Western mental health frameworks emphasize hierarchy, evaluation, and compliance. Healing-centered supervision emphasizes connection, strengths, context, and care, while still holding accountability. Relational leadership does not eliminate power. It uses power responsibly. It acknowledges that supervisors hold structural authority and asks, how do we hold that power in a way that supports growth rather than fear? Supervision shapes professional identity. It impacts burnout, retention, and ethical courage. It can either produce harm or become a place of healing and justice. Now, with power, safety, and accountability, let's look at power with responsibility. Power is always present. We can't deny that, whether we name it or not. Ethical supervision means being transparent about power, being open to feedback, and being willing to repair when harm occurs. Accountability and healing center supervision looks like naming impact, not just intent, modeling repair, and making it safe for supervisees to question, disagree, and grow. Psychological safety is not comfort. It is the freedom to be honest without fear of punishment or retaliation. So let's think about it. Let's ask ourselves, how do we currently invite feedback or share power in our supervisory relationships? If you recall in my last presentation, or my presentation last year, we had some tools that can help us receive feedback from our supervisees. And so we can find ways to ask from our supervisees what can we improve or how we best can help support them. So looking at practical strategies and beginning well. I always remember my mom would always say, I guess it's a Mexican saying, but it would say something along the lines of what starts well ends well, right? Lo que empieza bien, termina bien. So let's think about that, right? In beginning with our supervisees and how we begin supervision matters. The first sessions and how we consistently open each session sets the tone for everything that follows. I'm going to offer you some strategies. And I didn't include this one on here, but I do want to probably offer something that may sound a bit radical to something that's not within our training. But it's something simple, but it does encompass these 4 strategies here. And it's really to introduce yourselves. I know that oftentimes we think, well, we get assignments of who we're going to supervise. We go into the room and they should know who we are by now, but really take the time to set the tone for building that relationship. And it starts with introductions. How you introduce yourself, that's really, by, really framed around who you are, character-wise, with, culturally. So it may differ, but it really does open the door to and invite people to have that kind of transactional, right? Like give, not only we are going to be giving, but we also receive. And so introducing yourselves. It goes far, and it's just something that we are not often told or reminded of doing. Who you are outside of being also just the supervisor. Maybe your history in your profession. Who are you in the community? Who are you as a family member? Whatever identities or whatever factors are important to you and you want to share, I invite you to do that. And so with opening agreements, we talk about confidentiality, learning stance, share responsibilities, and then with relational check-ins, really like, how are you arriving today? Not just a generic, how are you, or, how's it going, but how is it going for you today? Especially with things that are happening around us, we really do also want to check in with those who supervise, because we're all impacted in one way or another, and we bring that with us. It's not like we leave that at the door. We can try, and we have been trained and told to leave that at the door, but we know that we still carry that. And so it's how we hold that and what we do with that that matters. So, and also, location and just really acknowledging like where we are, where is it that we are practicing, who we're serving, and that helps acknowledge identities and also power and differences, and also those important similarities that we often forget to uplift. Um, and then lastly, strengths and values, connecting supervision to meaning and purpose. These are all different strategies to bring into the process for yourself and for your supervisee. And to remember that these are not supplemental items or add-ons. These are indeed ethical practices that are vital in how we practice our supervision processes and relationships. And so now I'm going to invite you, and I was looking forward, and I kind of went fast a little bit just because I really wanted to get to this part of the presentation. And this is in the spirit of collective and community care, right? And I want to believe in that here in the ECHO series, supervision series, we are building community. And so I want to take some time to share with one another. And I'm going to ask Alex to open up some rooms to pair you up with someone else and to really reflect on and talk with one another about either what is one way you can begin supervision differently to increase safety, care, culture, humility, or name one practice you're willing to take forward from here today. And so if we can do that. Any questions regarding the questions? That's funny. Questions regarding questions. We can probably place those two in the chat for you to have access to, but just is one way you can begin supervision differently to increase safety, care, culture, humility, or one practice you're willing to take forward. Okay.
All right. It looks like we've got everyone back now. So go ahead, Brenda.
All right. Thank you so much. I hope you had a couple minutes to at least interact with one another outside of just a screen in front of you. I invite all of you or any of you who would like to share out just in chat, whatever question you answered with your partner. That way we can all see what are some ways that we're willing to commit to moving forward from here. And also if there's one of you that would like to share out here in the group, please just unmute yourself and share out. No takers? I can always just pick someone off my screen.
I can go. My name's Lisa Morad
Lisa,
McCoy. Hi, Brenda.
hi.
I missed being on this Echo. Anyway, I was with Lacey and we talked a lot about no matter what kind of supervision you're doing, there's always space, I think, to connect and process like on a deeper level, even if you are doing more admin supervision, because a lot of the reason I think why admin supervision or admin stuff can be difficult for people is because of how triggering the interactions can be at times based on people's background. And, not to step too close to doing therapy, but I think that when people say, well, I only do admin supervision, I think it can be a lot more than that, and usually is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Lisa. Yes, we always need to find the time and space to connect. We're all relational beings, right? So if there is no connection or efforts to connect, then that's also sending a message, and we need to be aware of that as well. All right. Well, I'll just come into our last slide here and kind of closing remarks or statements is, ethical supervision is relational leadership. we have moved away from really centering relationships, and I know that I have made it a point in my practice and in my leadership here at the organization is to center relationship once again. And so I hope that you're able to see some value in that and find ways to implement that or embed that in your own practice. And just ethics is embodied through relationship, not just regulation. Healing-centered supervision supports well-being, equity, and professional growth. How we begin supervision sets the tone for trust, accountability, and care. And let's not forget that healing is relational. And so in the work that we do, and I often refer to our work as heart work, there is healing and there is power in helping others heal, to heal ourselves. So thank you so much. Muchas gracias. And think there is this evaluation link that you all are invited to complete. And if there's any questions, like maybe one question, I think we may have one question before we get into the case discussion.
Yeah, we can take a couple of questions. Thank you so much, Brenda. I think this is such an important topic. And so I do encourage folks to raise your hand or unmute to ask a question. Please introduce yourself before asking the question. Yeah, like I said, we do have a few minutes. And we'll actually be doing the evaluation link at the end, Jacqueline. Brenda, I have a question for you while folks consider what they want to ask you. But and I think Lisa was touching on this a little bit, but what are your thoughts about how you thread that needle between a relational approach and something that is getting into more of a therapeutic dynamic that's not appropriate for a supervisory dynamic, because that invitation to like, how are you doing or what are you bringing today, somebody could respond by really like disclosing quite a bit in a way that you may feel like, hey, like that wasn't what I was trying to invite.
Yeah. Well, that's also information for you, right? As a supervisor, if they do bring that to the table and just start really, oversharing or really getting into in depth, that's also information to you in terms of where your supervisee is and what may be impacting the work that they're doing. And so, again, just really referring them back to external supports and what are they doing to help themselves in whatever it is that's affecting them in that day, in that moment. But I think that all just like in a clinical setting, right? Like you learn so much when you ask one question and then you get all these other answers, but the one answer you're looking for, it's very telling. And so we use our clinical skills in that as well. So I think that again, right, the rule of thumb is it's vice versa for you and for your supervisee. As long as you don't just make it about yourself, then you should be okay. But yeah, it's a skill to nurture and to get better at as you practice it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any thoughts or questions that they would like to share with Brenda? Go ahead, Janelle.
Brenda, I'm not sure if you saw the chat. Several of us had put some things in there for you, but I just wanted to say thank you for starting the presentation talking about that supervision is not about risk management, because sometimes you get a different message from other people in your organization. And so thank you. It's very important, and I appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you, Janelle. Yes, we have that other small factor, right? The bureaucracies and the organizational and systemic requirements that we have to meet, and it's always this thing you have to kind of learn to balance. But I think that as anything else, once you center that human aspect, um, you'll reap all the benefits at the end of that. So yeah, thank you for that though. Yes, thank you for the comments. I'm reading through some of them now. But thank
And
you. Go ahead.
yeah, Sonia?
Yeah, it wasn't a question, it was a comment. I really like this approach that you've laid out. And it made me think of when we get a new supervisee, sometimes we have to do like repair work because they've had bad experiences or negative experiences with supervision. And I feel like if we use some of the ideas that you have here, that'd be really helpful in those situations. So I just appreciate what you put together today. So thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. And this is our plug for the next eco-series presentation. Sonia and I will expand a little bit more on how to implement some of this in our supervision relationships. So. Thank you.
Great. I did get a message asking for more, if Brenda, if you can provide more examples of language.
Like clinical language, sorry, I think language and I think of, all the different things that
Yeah,
language
I
can
think
mean.
it was one of the slides that you had in terms of the language that you're using with your supervisee.
Okay. Yeah, well, I don't recall exactly how that was stated in the slide, but trying to think. Is it like the relational check-ins and how we ask how they're doing, or but and I just some thoughts that it just came are it also depends at what level your supervisee is in, right? If they're an actual student intern versus a new or emerging professional, or if they're a more seasoned clinician, right? That's all going to vary in how your language is going to vary. You don't want to come off too clinical with a student who is still learning what all this means and how to actually make use of all this clinical terminology in practice. And so it will all depend. But if they can clarify what they mean by language, let's see. Was that the last question by Yolanda? We addressed the part different.
No, but I think that's related in terms of just talking about the power differential and that language that reflects the setting.
Yeah, and another factor to consider, because I know I had this issue when I was a very new clinician, as a bilingual provider. We conduct our sessions in one language, and then we need to transfer that over to the English language in supervision and case staffings and documentation, and some of it gets lost in that. Or just as a bilingual mind, some things are a little bit clinically more difficult to make sense of in terms of the language use. So there are just different factors to consider when it comes to how we speak of this clinical world that we live in with supervisees. But it does depend on what level of their profession they're in.
Thank you, Brenda. So I think we're going to go ahead and transition over to